All right. We're going to be working from your officers and the internet handout, or as I like to call it, cop roadkill on the information highway. And I'd like to begin this unit of instruction with a little video clip.
I want you to get up now. I want all of you to get up out of your chairs. I want you to get up right now and go to the window, open it, and stick your head out and yell, "I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore."
Does anybody recognize that? Anybody? Anybody, Burkett? Recognize that? Do you recognize it, Rubio?
It's very familiar.
I will.
This recruit recognizes the phrase.
The phrase, and the reason we recognize the phrase is this film was called Network. It came out in 1976. For some of us, 1976 is not a lifetime or more ago. It was our adulthood. Now, who wants to tell me how old they were in 1976?
Depending on the month, I was just born.
Thank you. Anything else you want to do to rip my heart out and stomp it flat, Recruit Crandall? Good. Good. Thank you. Thank you. And some of you were like probably 10 years from even being, your parents hadn't even met. Thank you. Thank you. I'm in therapy for that, so you can't, I'm going to my happy place. I'm cleansing my chakra. You cannot touch me with that, okay? All right. But it won 3 out of 4 acting Oscars that year. It won an Oscar for Best Screenplay. It's listed, Network, in the American Film Institute's top 100 films. And the reason some of you who have no idea of the context might even recognize the phrase, "I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore," that was our generation's "show me the money. Where's the beef? Is that your final answer? Just do it." This film resonated, just like those phrases, with an entire generation. And the film presented a concept to us that was revolutionary, that was hard for us to wrap our minds around. It was so groundbreaking and advanced and kind of evil. Peter Finch, the actor, played a character, Howard Beale. Howard Beale was a news anchor man. Back in 1976, when the film came out, this film presented the idea to us, America's news viewing public, that news stations might actually be tweaking their reporting of the news in order to increase their ratings. You laugh because you've grown up with Fox News, CNN, MSNBC, and you just pick your right wing, left wing. That was a foreign concept to us. We grew up with Walter Cronkite, who year after year, he was a news anchor man, who year after year after year was voted the most trusted man in the nation. He told us about Neil Armstrong taking one small step for man. He reported on the Vietnam War. He told us when JFK had been killed. He told us when Robert Kennedy had been killed. He shared with us the news and tears and sorrow over those assassinations and Dr. Martin Luther King. And we knew Robert Cronkite had no agenda, political, had no ratings. He told us the truth in an objective fashion. And we expected that of all our news. And Howard Beale, the news anchorman, who starts sharing with his audience, has a mental breakdown, this concept that he's not supposed to just report the news. speaks to his audience on a personal level about don't let them do this to you. Don't participate in it. Demand more, demand better. Don't be part of it. So what's that got to do? And think about the idea that what you take for granted was scandalous to us. Scandalous. Sometimes the phrase, we've come a long way, baby, it's not a good way. But anyway, yes, and I'm nostalgic for those Walter Cronkite days. Now my husband and I just go back and forth between CNN and Fox News and try to figure out the middle ground is probably somewhere where objective reality exists. Okay, so what has this got to do with officers and the internet? What is that film clip? Well, across this nation, law enforcement officers are suffering career-ending fatalities or career-damaging injuries for what they post on the internet, and the profession is doing little to no training on officers' rights, responsibilities, and liabilities for what they post on the internet. And the officers in their careers are not the only damage being done. What officers are posting on the internet that ends many of their careers or damages their careers for the rest of their career also can destroy the public's trust in that entire agency. And if the public doesn't trust that agency, they don't cooperate with it, so it becomes a burden every officer in that agency carries. And it is destroying interagency trust, respect, and cooperation. Agencies officers have to work with in the performance of their duty to protect people, like child protection service workers. Now, and when the profession, and in my mind, this is an issue of officer safety. This isn't an academic, legal kind of exercise. It's an issue of officer safety, because let me ask you, if the public doesn't trust you, doesn't respect you, and will not cooperate with you, is your job more dangerous? Yes. Absolutely. So when the profession fails to deal with a daily occurring, headline-making issue of officer safety, that makes me mad as hell. And I'm not going to put up with it. Too often, instead of developing training and policies and procedures specific to the risks of officers and what they post on the internet, instead, law enforcement's leadership, many of whom are baby boomers, we still even have some lingering called matures. They don't like to be called seniors. That's politically incorrect for that group. Don't call them seniors. They are called either traditionalists, the radio generation, matures. They don't mind mature, but not senior. Too often, the leadership they offer on this very legally complex, high-risk, precarious, ever-changing, quickly advancing technology, what they say is, don't put anything on the internet that you wouldn't want to see on the front page of a newspaper. That's the training. That's the instruction on the law, what First Amendment and Fourth Amendment protections you might have to what you post. And if the headlines are any indication, that's not cutting it. That's not working to protect these career-ending, agency trust-destroying fatalities. And there's a couple of reasons. One reason is generational. So when I'm giving this training, one of the first times I gave it in Alaska, I gave it at the APSC, Alaska Police Standards Council Annual Executive Leadership Conference. I gave this training. I left that conference with 3 trainings scheduled from people there going, holy shit, I had no idea it was this complicated, and I didn't know the answer to any of your scenarios, and I guess it's not common sense. I guess we need training. And to my knowledge, this academy is the only academy in the nation that has devoted an 8-hour, as far as I know, any unit of instruction at the academy level on this issue. Lots of trainings occur after the academy on how to use the internet to catch bad guys, how police chiefs can set up a website for their department to have community outreach, community relations, get tips, you know, all that kind of stuff, do hiring and recruiting. So my hat's off to Alaska law enforcement because they recognize and see the need. But I say to those people, great, you're telling them you're telling Gen X and Gen Y, don't put anything on the internet you wouldn't want to see on the front page of a newspaper. Ask Gen X and Gen Y how many of them get a newspaper delivered. There it is. How many of you are millennial or Gen X? Everybody but me and Burkett. How many of you have a newspaper delivered to your house? I rest my case. I found out I have 4 Gen X daughters. Not one of them has ever subscribed to a newspaper that I'm aware of. I found out bin Laden was dead. You guys knew that, right? Okay. Because I opened the front door. It was still dark out. I sent my dog, first I send the dog out, dog pees. Then I point to the newspaper, say, fetch it. Dog picks up the newspaper, brings it back. She's hell on ducks and geese, too. But she does the newspaper. I open it up. On the front page, letters this big. Bin Laden dead. The vast majority of millennial, Gen Y, Gen Xers found out through some type of electronic media communication. Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, their friends. Twitter broke the news before the President of the United States of America. So we have a generational difference in terms of technology. Now, all the generations have experienced these technological advances, but we experience them differently, right? Unless a baby boomer or a maturer is a bubble boy or bubble girl and lives in complete isolation, I've experienced these technological changes. I've experienced them very different than my 18-year-old grandson. And by the way, I'm not that old. I married an older man. Okay. Because here's the difference. I'm pretty well educated, and you have to have technology kind of to survive. And I work, have my own business, so I've got to have a website and that kind of stuff. But the difference is, while I've experienced the digital revolution and technological revolution, it began later in my life. My grandson has grown up in it. So he gets a new digital toy. He takes it out of the box, and what does he start doing? It's like dueling banjos. The last digital camera I bought, I opened the box, I took the camera out, I took all the packing out, and I'm looking in the box. What am I looking for? Yes, there isn't one. I pack it back up. I go back to Best Buy, to the young 20-something that sold me the camera. I said, I must have got, a bad packing one or something. There's no owner's manual in it. He says, what's that? I said, that's instructions that tell me how to turn the camera on. He said, they don't come with that. I said, is there any place I can get that? He said, online. Just Google your camera model manual. I go back home. I Google it. I find it. Tell me what I did. I printed it out. I cut it. I stapled it. I read it. I carry it with my camera. We experience these technological changes differently, okay? This changes in my lifetime, in my grandson's lifetime. With his age, you probably already know this, email is passé. That means they don't do it anymore. I just got on board with emailing my grandson. That was the only way to communicate with him. I just got on board with emailing him, and I email him, I hear nothing. I email him, I hear nothing. I email him, the box is full. They don't communicate with email anymore. They've done studies of college students now. Email, they don't do anymore. What do? They text. They text. They don't email anymore. Email, just when I think I'm on the cutting edge, I'm running to catch up again. So, how many of you have Facebook or some other kind of social network page or site? Just raise your hand. Okay, it's easier for me to see. How many do not? Does your spouse?
Yes, ma'am.
Does your spouse?
No, ma'am.
Does your spouse? Does your spouse? Does your spouse? Don't have one. Okay. Spouse?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So if you include spouses, very, very small percentage of you do not. Those of you who do, let me see those who do. Okay, let me just take a random sampling. How many friends? Well, first, of those who have one, hands down, of those who have one, how many of you have privacy settings? Okay, easier for me. Of those who have them, who does not have any privacy settings? Right. So we're good to go. Yeah, I've got it, but I got privacy settings. I'm all over this, sir. No problems. How many friends? Couple hundred. Who's more popular? Who has more than a couple of hundred friends? Right, of course. How many friends you got, Bresnahan?
Probably about 400 million.
Probably about 400. Who's more popular than Bresnahan? Who has less than a dozen? So somewhere between a dozen, 200 and 400, you guys think is private. I know I'm older than you, but we're both in the same work generation. When we were in high school, how many people would we share personal information with and not expect it to get out to the entire school?
No more than a handful. No more, maybe a couple.
Well, here's what I realized when I was in high school. For me, it was my two best friends, Patsy Robinson and Susan Hall. And I shared something with them, and I swore them to secrecy on their mother's grave. And they gave the pledge, and they kept it. They didn't tell anybody else. But because I had shared it with them at the same time, they felt they could discuss it between the two of them. And they did that at the soda fountain at Drug Fair, and somebody overheard them. So then I realized I could share with one person I trusted and not expect it to get out to the whole school. That's my generation's expectation of privacy. Because the internet wasn't invented even yet by Al Gore, okay? I went to law school after being out of college for 5 years, used a Xerox machine for the first time in my life, and thought, how does it do this? We were so amazed, and it was so cool and so magical. That's when people would pull their pants down and moon the Xerox machine, take a picture, and set it, and go, oh, yeah. And fax, it's like, fax machine, I'm still with a thermos. I know it keeps things hot, and I know it keeps things cold, but how does it know the difference? It's magic. Okay, so we've got these different generations in the workplace, and you think you call this privacy protected. With 200, 400, my grandson had 500 friends. And I said, Shane, you can't know all those people. You can't have met them all. Friends has a different meaning now, too. You want to know what friend means to me? Somebody that I can trust absolutely and implicitly. Somebody who would give me leave time if I got sick. Somebody who would take leave to take care of me or one of my kids. That's what a friend is. And by God, I know them. And I've shared good times with them, and I've shared bad times with them. And they don't become a friend until we get through the good times and bad times on the other side of it. And I know I can trust them through both. And they know all my warts, and they still call me a friend. My grandson hasn't even met all those people, but he thinks it's private. So the definition of friends has changed. So using metaphors like newspapers and our whole concepts of privacy are just eons, generations apart. When I was 12 years old, this was a big thing in my day and age. For my 12th birthday, I got a diary, an actual print one, empty. It had a lock and key, and the first time you used the key, it broke, and so then you had to hide it from your brother and your mom. And that's where you put your most secret, unedited, uncensored thought, and you locked the key, you hid it. Now teens and preteens are sharing and blogging on social network sites and blogs and websites set up for teens and preteens to share this. They're sharing those exact same thoughts. They're sharing suggestive photos. They're sharing their sexual posting online their sexual fantasies and preferences and where they hang out and who they hang out with and what they'd like Jamie at school to do to them if they were left on a lone shack. That's all going. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with any of that. It's part of adolescence and hormones, but mine was in the locked diary, stuck away, and the bad things I said about my parents and how I was going to run away and leave home and I'll show them and, wishing my brother dead. Private. And now they're blogging about it. And the photos are provocative. Anybody heard of Snapchat? What can you tell me about, I saw your hand first, what can you tell me about Snapchat, Recruit Spears?
Snapchat is an app for smartphones that allows you to send a picture to another person that is supposed to be temporary. You can set the time they can view it, normally up to 10 seconds. A lot of people don't realize that those pictures.
I'll add that part. So you got teens and preteens and even parents, because I've read the news articles about it, and they've interviewed parents. So here's what happens, right? The 13-year-old or 14-year-old picks her shirt up, takes a picture of her naked breasts, sends it to some guy she likes or her boyfriend or her girlfriend or whatever. When she clicks send, it doesn't just, this is what I keep trying to tell people. What does WWW stand for? World Wide Web. That's where it goes. And once it goes, it is there on the World Wide Web. Now, somebody receives it directed to them. When they receive it, it has not been taken off the World Wide Web. So, Snapchat is this app that some bright people realize kids will love this because they can send the photo, but they can set it to disappear in a few seconds. Well, Google, Snapchat, does the picture really disappear? Do you think kids do that? No, the makers of the app said, well, no, just because it's not on that person's phone doesn't mean it's not out there on the frame, the web, whatever you want to call it, and it can be retrieved. It just has disappeared from their phone. That's all. But parents and kids think it's gone. It's not gone. Yes.
In addition, many phones have screenshot capabilities, and it's very easy to take a screenshot of the Snapchat image you've received and save it to your phone.
Yeah, but even then, it's not, even if they don't do that, it's not gone. And the other thing is, the devices encourage us to do things we would never do in person, right? She's not going to do this in person. But removed on the phone only lasts for 3 seconds. She thinks, or he thinks, I'll do it. And we'll get to another thing that this technology encourages people to do that we would never do in person, and that's anonymous comments posted on the internet. Things people would never, ever say if it could be attributed to them. So this I tell the leadership, one of my go-to geeks, and I say that in the nicest way, Nick Hayes is a trooper in Fairbanks, and he was in the ALEC class where I first taught this, and this is a continually evolving unit of instruction because of the technology changing, but I'll be giving you guys a handout asking what other stuff you might want covered or not, because, as I said, this is an evolving unit of instruction. He worked for Yahoo.com before his law enforcement life. And it's not just Snapchat. He said, people don't understand, whatever you post on the internet, when you take it down, it's not gone. All these companies have backup. They have backup for the backup, and they have backup for the backup. In case something happens with them, they've saved the information, because people would be really pissed if they had a computer glitch and they lost it and they couldn't retrieve it. So they have backup for the backup, backup for the backup, backup for the backup. And he said to actually get rid of something so that it couldn't be somehow traced someplace, you would have to be a very, very, very good hacker and probably commit a felony to penetrate all the backup, to really get rid of it. What that means for us, forget just that it can be hacked, and it can be subpoenaed. It can be discovered under the rules of discovery in a criminal case or a civil case, and we'll look at what they get from your personal postings. So, and these changes have not just affected how we get news. The technology shapes the news. Do you think a Twitter on bin Laden is the same as reading a full investigative news report? No, but that's going to be their sense of history. That's how complicated their sense of history is going to be, and all the nuances that go into all these wars and news and events. The only way we used to get it is you had to read the whole newspaper or watch one of 4 news channels that only reported the news at 6 o'clock at night and 10 o'clock at night. I remember when there were 4 TV stations I could watch. That's it. They went off the air at midnight with a star-spangled banner and a flag waving, and then a test pattern was on your TV until programming on those 4 stations began again the next morning. In between that time, you wanted to hear anything from the outside, radio. That was it. That was our only. There weren't computers. That's what law enforcement leadership grew. I know it's hard to wrap your mind around, but that is why the leader. I'm not making excuses for their failure of leadership, and I am traveling nationwide to spread the gospel about how their approach is not cutting it. And they need to get on board. Don't be a dinosaur. The technology train has left the station. It's not going to come back. We don't serve you well by saying, don't do it. We're not going to stop you from doing it. And I don't think we should. I mean, it's especially in Alaska, it's a great way to stay in touch with family. Why would people in the military not take advantage of Skype? I got to talk to my dad when he was in Vietnam, maybe once every 3 months, and I was on a phone, and a Mars patcher was patching it in, and my dad would talk to the Mars guy, the Mars would relate what my dad would say. We had to say over so that they could stop and do the patch the other way. That was the only communication other than letters. And that was maybe once every 3 months. So it's wonderful. It's wonderful how it connects us. But it doesn't just change the content of the news and how we receive news and information and how we process it and how we consume goods. It changes how we interact with each other. You got an image? I got an image. That's the new reality. That's not my image. That's not my image. That's not my image. Now, I apologize for how bad the quality. It was taken off the internet. It's hard to see, but you can see this vehicle is not at a stop because it's in the middle of the intersection. And look at the driver. It's in the middle of the intersection. The only person not interacting with their electronic device is the back right-hand seat passenger, from what I can see. And the car is moving. And they're not talking to each other. Let's go for a drive. I mean, you probably have to watch old sitcoms from the 60s to know what image comes to my mind with each one of these captions. Because it's totally different. There's not a single electronic device in the images. Because I had a life before any of that existed. And I use myself as an example because I'm the age of a lot of law enforcement leadership. What I tell law enforcement leadership is we cannot deal with this changing technology when the different generations came of age, how it has impacted their lives, with father knows best, leave it to beaver metaphors of don't put anything on the internet you don't want to see on the front page of a newspaper. That's negligent. That's civilly negligent. To think that is proper training and preparation when the risks are so high. Now, there's another reason other than generational. When they say just use common sense, don't put anything on the internet you wouldn't want to have on the newspaper, we've got a generational gap that does not breach. But what's common sense to law enforcement leadership is different to new recruits and new officers. And you're at risk right now for ending your career. I mean, you know that, don't you? Hey, I've been here where 7 kids were voted off the island in a cheating scandal. And it was very unceremonial. Their stuff was packed and get out of here. You don't belong with us. It was wrenching for the remaining. I mean, but do you understand right now you could end your career before it's even begun? Right now, you're being held to a different, higher standard.